We wants it. We needs it. Must have the precious. They stole it from us sneaky little hobbitses. Wicked, tricksy, false. No, not master. Yes, precious. False. They will cheat you, hurt you, lie. Master is my friend. You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. Not listening. No, I'm not listening. You're a liar and a thief. No, murderer. Go away. Go away. I hate you. I hate you. Where would you be without me? Gollum. Gollum. I saved us. It was me. We survived because of me. Not anymore. What did you say? Master looks after us now. We don't need you. What? Leave now and never come back. No! Leave now and never come back. Leave now and never come back. We told him to go away, and away he goes, precious. Gone, gone, gone. Smeagol is free. The Lord of the Rings.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses.
I apologize, I am not as good as Andy Serkis when it comes to voices, but I hope you enjoyed my impression of Gollum and Smeagol.
I was just going to say props to you both because that is not an easy thing to execute. We are talking today about characters that have multiple personalities. This is not schizophrenia. It's what we call Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID.
This is one of the least understood mental disorders out there. It is difficult and has long been, I think, misrepresented in a lot of fiction. The psychological definition of dissociative identity disorder, or DID, is a mental health condition where someone has multiple distinct personalities. The various identities control a person's behavior at different times. It can cause memory loss, delusions, or depression, and is usually caused by past trauma.
There are some other symptoms that can occur, but unlike a lot of the stuff that we've talked about so far this month, this particular thing is based more on the symptoms and less on the trauma that caused them. So some other things that can happen alongside DID would be anxiety, delusions, depression, some disorientation. There's also a very common occurrence of substance abuse and memory loss, and occasionally suicidal thoughts or self-harm.
When it comes to DID, the personalities are usually split in a fairly specific way. There's the core, which is the most common personality, and then they have the alters, the ones that present themselves usually in specific occasions, specific circumstances. And it's important to know that someone can have up to 100 different alters. That is a lot of personalities.
You do see this pop up in a lot of psychological thrillers, this kind of storytelling where one personality is guilty of something, but the other personality is innocent in some way. One of the more recent examples is the Disney Plus Marvel show Moon Knight, where the main character thinks he works at a museum, but is actually a vigilante in one of his alters.
One of the oldest examples is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and a little bit of Bruce Banner and the Hulk. Not quite the same thing, but it is that other personality within him that takes control.
Another fascinating depiction of this dissociative identity disorder is Shyamalan's Split, and I believe Glass later on has the same character in it. But the main character is kidnapped by one of the personalities and then meets some of the other personalities who think they're also victims of the same kidnapper.
Now, oddly enough, when the symptoms of DID are presented in children, it can often be misdiagnosed as ADHD.
DID is almost never diagnosed in children. It's almost always diagnosed at least past 20 years old.
It's not always something that is born or caused just by their normal things. Like we said at the beginning, this is usually a trauma response. And it can be caused, instead of just by an emotional trauma, but by actual physical head trauma or physical injury. It messes with the brain makeup and can cause this dissociation.
Bipolar disorder is also very different from DID. You may have extreme reactions to things, but both sides are aware of each other. They are not multiple personalities. It's the same personality exhibiting vastly different reactions outside of the normal emotional spectrum.
Yeah, bipolar is more about emotional extremes rather than personality extremes. And I know I mentioned that the head trauma causes the dissociation, but actual dissociation and amnesia don't necessarily mean the person has DID.
Ultimately, it's a trauma disorder and not necessarily a personality disorder. I've also seen a mild version of this in linguists, where your personality shifts when you're speaking in different languages. That's not DID. You're all aware of each other, but the circumstances in which you learn the language are how you communicate within the language. So those can vary depending on what language you're speaking.
I actually see this quite a bit in watching Korean dramas, because this character will have a very distinct personality. And even though I don't understand Korean, I can kind of see the personality as they're speaking. And then as soon as they speak in English, it's like a whole different person is talking, and they're suddenly very prim, very proper, and very straightforward. And it's like, okay, that's not the same person, but that's how they learned English is spoken. I always think of people when they start to speak German, they get really angry.
You'll also hear pitch differences. Someone who's speaking Japanese could possibly be speaking in a higher pitch range than someone who's speaking Aussie.
Now, when it comes to the key traits of someone who has DID, the thing to remember is that there, at the moment, is no cure for it. However, going through therapy can help reduce the symptoms of it.
In therapy, they may try to merge similar identities or work through the source of the trauma in order to lessen the frequency of hopping between the different personalities. And what makes the character hop between personalities will be a key part in how you write this. In Split, I believe it was a flash of light, makes the character hop to a different personality. In the case of Bruce Banner and the Hulk, he just has to get super angry, and therefore he transforms into the Hulk. Transforming back is a whole other issue.
As you mentioned earlier, DID is usually diagnosed in adulthood, and I think that is probably to do with the fact that in children, in teenagers, your personality is still kind of shifting and changing as you figure out who you are. So it's hard to diagnose somebody with shifting personalities if their personality is always shifting.
I feel like there's a lot more opportunities to write DID in fantasy, because of the possibility in the case of Moon Knight of this other personality taking over a person. So it's an external source.
And that's often, I think, how the Hulk is represented, how Venom is represented. It's this external thing within the main character taking over.
I've seen people draw up characters in Dungeons and Dragons for someone who is physically taken over by the sword, so that when that character dies, the person who loots the body then gets taken over by the sword, and the sword continues on and killing whatever it wants to. Cursed objects, great for DID.
Not only do you have this ability to have the supernatural elements, but your character can have a different skill set. The alters can have different skills from the core personality. They may suddenly become left-handed when they're normally right-handed, or they have an accent, or they can actually speak a whole different language because this other personality has done the research or had all these skills, while the core personality is completely unaware of any of that.
Which, if they're physical skills, can present as mysterious bruises. One of the things that you see pop up most frequently in fiction is your character having amnesia, forgetting things, waking up in the middle of the street and thinking maybe they were sleepwalking when it was actually one of the alters who took them on a joyride.
And while, like I mentioned earlier, disassociation is not a guarantee that you have DID, That kind of sense of being detached from yourself, being detached from your emotions, is common in someone with this disorder.
And this may kind of go without saying, but someone who's suffering from DID also has sort of a weird sense of identity. It's often blurred or undefined.
And of course, I'm sure you can imagine the stress this would cause on any personal relationships, because you're not always you.
I feel like Moon Knight does a good job of showing this, where people are like, yeah, we spoke last week, or hey, let's meet on Friday, and then he doesn't realize he's lost a week, and it's the following Friday, or it's Tuesday.
And despite what is represented in Split, people with DID are far more likely to be victims later on in life of some kind of crime or trauma, rather than perpetrators. They are rarely dangerous people.
But that's not as much fun to write, because this person who is, from an external point of view, very erratic, very unpredictable, very difficult to emotionally connect with, becomes a villain very easily. So make sure you're writing, even if they're a villain, writing these DID characters with care and attention, and in a way that serves your story best. And that means making it realistic. That also means having fun. And that also means
writing selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.